Ruth Hughes is the founder of Curious Human and a leadership and career coach specializing in coaching psychology and positive psychology. And she has over 30 years experience in education and leadership, and she now works as a coach, consultant and a speaker, helping individuals and organizations improve their performance and their well-being and how they show up at work. She holds an MSc in Applied Positive Psychology and Coaching Psychology and is also involved in higher education as a lecturer and research supervisor, alongside speaking at international conferences across the education sector. She's also been at the coalface of marketing and admissions at a leading independent school in the UK, and her work focuses on helping people better understand themselves to build confidence and develop more effective ways of thinking and behaving, particularly in high pressure professional environments. I'm proud to call her a friend too, and I'm delighted that she can join us today. Welcome, Ruth.
Oh, thanks for inviting me along, Nicola.
So good. We've been talking before, and I'd love to share this with the people listening. We've been talking about something called a sales self.
Yeah.
So what is a sales self in simple terms?
I guess in simple terms, it's simply the part of you that's willing to influence a decision that genuinely serves somebody. I mean, saying we've got a sales self sounds a bit like, am I split into different people? But we all have different roles, different parts of ourselves. The part of you that's a mum or a dad or a partner or a son or a daughter or an aunt, those we can kind of think, okay, I behave differently there than I do in a professional setting. But also, I guess it's Aristotle says we are what we repeatedly do. And when we become familiar with a certain pattern of behavior, then we can slip into, our driving self kind of takes over. We don't have to think too much. Your underlying values, your beliefs don't change. It's nothing sinister. I have to become this whole other person to do this job. But yeah, if you think of what's sales for, it's helping people make decisions. So your sales self would be the part of you that's best suited to helping other people make the decision that's right for them.
I love the idea of tapping into my different selves for different
Yeah.
situations. But why do so many people in admissions or in selling education resist identifying as salespeople? Why is that?
I think maybe there's a tendency to think of it as being a different personality or a performance, and people resist that. Um, I think the word sales can carry with it the kind of emotional residue of being pushy or manipulative or self-serving. So I think with a lot of what we do, it isn't just the thing that you do, it's your underlying story that you tell yourself about what it is that you do, and I can explain it in really simple terms. If you're driving behind someone who's driving really slowly in front of you, and you're kind of in your head, you're like, oh, for goodness sake, who lets these people out on the road? I'm in a hurry, I need to be there. And then if you knew, for example, that that person had just come from the hospital where they'd lost their loved one, and they were trying to get home and not cry, and so they were going really slowly, or they'd just had some terrible news themselves, suddenly you've got so much more patience and compassion for them, um, because it isn't the driving slowly. It's your goal, what you want to do, and the story that you're telling yourself about that other person that changes how you feel. And I would say that's the same about sales. If you're telling yourself a story because you've got an underlying idea of what sales is and who you are, and your values seem to be incongruent with the story that you're telling yourself about the job that you're doing, then you're going to resist that identity and you're going to feel uncomfortable in that behavioral role. I'm a good person, I support students, and I'm not a salesperson. Well, actually, those two things don't have to be incongruent at all.
And so, what is the risk of them not developing a sales identity?
I think, well, there's a risk of not being effective in your sales role. I think there are two risks. One of them is to do with how you feel about yourself. So if you're constantly thinking every time I have to speak to somebody and communicate the value of what it is that we do, I feel uncomfortable and awkward. That's not a great way um, for you to feel and for your well-being, because you're constantly in identity conflict or values conflict. And then I suppose in terms of your effectiveness actually with what you're doing with people, if you think, oh, I'm a nice person, I'm just sharing information, you can give information and you can answer questions, you can feel nice about yourself, but maybe you're not actually helping people decide. um, Maybe people who would have benefited don't take the next step because you're not clear about what your role is in terms of helping them.
Okay, and well, I mean, how do we shift, not necessarily me necessarily as a trainer, but a school leader, for example, how do they help somebody in their admissions team shift from admin kind of mindset through to commercial mindset that they kind of need to be selling, as we keep saying now, but they need to be slightly more commercial and thinking about conversion. So how do we help them shift, or can't we?
Um, I think it's, again, I'm kind of come back. Everything's to do with the story that somebody is telling themselves about what they're doing. So if you've got an admin mindset, you might be thinking, oh, my job is to process information, provide answers to the questions that people ask. Or if you have an underlying understanding that your job is to help someone make a good decision, the right decision, the decision that will benefit them and their family, there's a different kind of energy to that. And the job that you're doing sort of changes. You're, instead of just responding, which is actually relatively passive. I know so many amazing admin people who are just like, I know my stuff really well and I'll answer the question. Um, but there's another level if you have that understanding of sales where you're listening to what really matters to the person that you're talking to. You're not just answering, you're guiding, and you're being willing to close the loop. So your own sense of discomfort um, becomes less of a focus for you than really helping that person make a decision. And sometimes that's a no instead of a yes. But maybe a lot of the admin people I know are so nice and they want to be liked. And so actually being clear, what is it that this person wants? What is it that we offered? Will that offer value for them? And actually sometimes the answer is no, and that's okay too, because you can spend a lot of time not being clear. So yeah, I think that that person trying to help the admin team in the training would be, let's get the underlying narrative straight. What is it that I'm actually doing here? Am I being nice? Am I providing information? Or am I helping, supporting, guiding this person into making the best decision through them, through skills like listening and being willing to close that sales loop?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I would, as a sales coach, I would take that a bit further, because I think that still sounds quite passive to me. So when I'm
Okay.
trying to get people to follow up and actually take action, which is where I think we're leaving enrolments on the table, then they feel that's pushy. So that niceness does come into it again. So
Yeah, yeah.
it's how to reassure them that taking action is in the interests of someone that is undecided. That
Yeah, totally.
feels wrong to them, I guess. So is that still their limiting belief coming in? What is that happening with them, I
Yeah,
guess?
you've got performance enhancing beliefs, so that the underlying story that you've just talked about, helping somebody take the action, make that decision. Um, the beliefs that come up, I mean, you know, I've worked with you a few times and helping people overcome those beliefs, but things like, you know, I don't want to pressure them. You know, if it's right for them, they'll decide on their own. It's not my place to influence them, and they're going to think I'm being salesy. Those kinds of things. They sound ethical and they are value based, but quite a lot of the time they're avoidance,
Mm.
and they're trying to protect the person from feeling uncomfortable. Um, you know, they it's like, oh, it's integrity, but actually, you know, I'm a coach, so and this is a journey that I've been on as well as a coach, because I came from an education background, um, and I wanted to help people, I wanted to support people, and the style of coaching of my original training was cathartic, supportive, facilitative, and I'm a positive psychology coach, so I use psychological strategies that basically come from what helps people and well-being. And then I got a job at Cambridge University, and their coaching certificate program is a lot more to do with challenging, informing, and confronting. And I'm not even comfortable with the word confronting. Um, but there are, you know, executive coaches, people like Jonathan Passmore. He uses language. He called himself in one of the articles that I read a benevolent torturer, which sounds horrific, but he said that one of the jobs of coaches is to hold up a mirror and speak truth to people who quite often don't have many people challenging them.
Mm.
So what the most helpful thing can be for people is to really ask, you know, what's going on here? What is the truth? Now, I'm not suggesting that direct parallel with salespeople, but I do think there are parallels. If you look at the coaching model, the grow model, what is your goal? What is it we actually want here? Not just what we say we want, but what's really going on. And so asking those questions to work out what your customer's goal is. And then what's the reality? Can they afford it? Is it what they really want? Is it what the young person involved in this conversation wants? And then what are your options? So, and what are the underlying values? What are the stories they're telling themselves? And then we can say, well, what's your way forward here? And I notice this sometimes, you know, working with you, I've learned so much from you as well. When I'm having a discovery conversation, one of the things that you know, somebody says, I'd like you to help me with this particular thing. I've got this goal, and I'll have the conversation. And then that very last bit, the way forward, you know, what's your decision on this? And quite often you'll get, oh, I need to think about it. Have you then arranged a time? Okay, how long do you need? By next Wednesday, is there any more information that you need that would help you with that decision? And I'll get back to you by then if I haven't heard from you. So those kinds of things, it's not like I've got a magic wand and I can stop it from feeling uncomfortable, but actually that's helpful for both of us.
Mm.
We're both really clear. That's when the decision will be made. They know that I'm there to help with further information, rather than just leaving it. And also you're setting and meeting expectations. They know that if they haven't got back to you by Wednesday, you will call them. And that's agreed before you stop. Everything's clearer.
I
Yeah.
love that. And I was talking to, excuse me, an agent yesterday, and she was saying, well, actually, I'm a mum of three. If someone doesn't nudge me, I forget, and I beat myself up about forgetting stuff. So it's very useful for someone just to
Right.
nudge me and nicely remind me. And I thought, yeah, you're absolutely right. In a nice way. It's not, I think the worry is that people are chasing and pushing,
Yeah.
whereas actually it's really not. And I think moving on from that. So how can someone kind of spot their own limiting beliefs, hold their own mirror up? Is it like a
Yeah,
daily habit?
I think notice in yourself,
Excuse me.
you know, if you're thinking, oh, I'm not sure if I should say that, I'm just going to leave it with them. If you're thinking, I don't want to push here, that might not be ethics. That might just be your uncomfortableness and you're wanting to avoid yourself. And again, I'm gonna take it back to coaching. I'm also a coach supervisor, and Heron has a great model for you know, I'll ask a coach why they're using a particular tool or technique or particular approach. Are you doing it because that is your genuine belief that this is the most effective way forward for the person you're talking to? Or are you doing it because you feel more comfortable?
Or not
Yeah.
doing it, I guess.
Or not doing it because you feel more comfortable. So what does it and again, that's a really helpful narrative for all the lovely people in admissions. You know, leaving somebody not knowing themselves, if you're calling or not, is that helpful to them? Leaving somebody with a busy life, not having that clarity, you know, helping people make a decision either way is a relief. And you not doing that because you feel discomfort isn't helpful to you either, because how much of your time are you spending thinking, oh, I wonder what happened with such a body? And I know you're such a one for scheduling. You, if you know yourself, all right, I've got this list, I know where people are in the pipeline, I know that if I haven't heard from them by then, I'm going to contact them again. It makes your life clearer and easier. And you're not going to be thinking, oh, I wonder what went wrong with that one. All these other performance inhibiting thoughts. Did I do something wrong? Did I not give them the right information? Actually, if you've got a clear plan, you know you've given them the information, you know you followed up, and you ask for a reason, and that's okay. That's helpful for you. That's helpful for the next person. Yeah.
I like that, and it's. I find there are two in independent schools admissions rather than language school admissions. There seem to be two types. One that would question themselves about what happened. I did this tour; it was amazing. They da 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 da, and they're not getting back to me. And then the other type that think, well, they can't have been interested then. And then it's very much it's them, not us.
Yeah.
Which I find, which is interesting. So I'm not sure they would be able to hold up that mirror. I don't believe that they need to hold up the mirror in the first place. But so how do we help our teams to become more confident and setting the next step, for example, which is a key to the follow-up part that you've mentioned? So how do we get them to do that without feeling pushy or actually becoming pushy? Is there anything we can do to build their confidence in that?
I think, you know, less informing and more guiding. So rather than I'm just going to dump a load of information on you, you know, based on what we've said and what you said and what you said you wanted, this feels like a strong fit. Shall we look at next steps? You know, that this kind of how do we move it on to the next stage? And if somebody's like, oh, I'm really not sure, asking the question, what's stopping you from moving forward right now? And you know, would it be helpful if we mapped out a clear timeline together now for next steps? So, you know, be calm and direct and focused. That can be really helpful, I think.
It's building a little bit of resilience around that. If they say, "Oh no, I'm not sure, we're not ready yet," isn't it?
Yeah.
And then taking a breath and not reacting,
Yeah.
and retreating.
And I think that's you know what you said about the other kind of school. You can have the entirely externalized locus of control. Oh well, you know, it's not them, and then give up too early as well.
Yeah.
Trying to get that balance right between being helpful and because maybe that's a kind of defense mechanism that you put up that you know, well, I'm doing everything right, so you've got to have that level of awareness, that metacognition, what's going on in the process, where are they at, the emotional attunement, without taking responsibility for their decision. In the end, it is their decision. All you can do is provide the information and really try to understand where they're at. And then actually after that point, it isn't up to you, it's up to them.
Mm. And in that process, so when you're counselling a student or you're doing a tour or whatever it might be, why do we as humans default to that over explaining, that information dump, the basically talking them through what's on the website already, instead of guiding the decisions with great questioning and rapport building? It's just info dump with a couple of, I've seen a lot of tours where there's a couple of standard questions at the start.
Yeah.
They don't seem particularly engaged with the answers, but they're not genuinely curious, I would say. So why do we do that? Is it because we're doing it a lot? We're doing it every day, or why are we over explaining stuff rather than helping be a guide?
I think it comes down to psychological safety.
Okay.
If we know our stuff, it keeps us really safe in that zone. I think part of it is probably training. Maybe we're not really clear what our job is. So they've got the performance success triangle of clarity, motivation, and capability. So am I clear about what my job is in sales here? Or is it my job, I think, to describe the information? At your No Fluff sales conference, Kamal's talk was really interesting. Anyone who didn't go, he was talking about Gen Z needs and motivation. And actually, one of my hats, I also lecture for the American Institute for Foreign Study in the psychology, the science of well-being. And I really thought about my slides after his talk. I'm thinking, okay, he explained that millennials and even Gen X, older than millennials, tend to think in terms of features and uh, results, impacts. So, and myself as a director of admissions, I've worked for a most amazingly beautiful school, and here we've got the golf course, and here we've got the design studio, and here we've got these amazing buildings, and you're showing the features. But Gen Z are more interested in their experience. What does this mean for me? I'm not interested in a golf course if I don't play golf. I am interested in what the relationships are like here. I am interested in what my life would look like here. And I'm kind of wondering if some of what you're doing, I mean, I'm really interested in the stuff and the information, and I looked at what I teach. I'm thinking I'm delivering a lot. This is the theory and these are the researchers, but how does it relate to you and your life? And I've completely redone my course, thinking about experience rather than information. And the difference that it's had in the response from the students has been extraordinary. And actually, I've had a lot more fun with it. So I would almost encourage that approach. Instead of showing all the things, really think, what would that mean for that young person coming here? Let me talk about the journey. And I also think, you've heard me talk about psychological models like the scarf model before. So our sense of status and certainty and autonomy and relatedness. I mean, admissions people are people. Yeah. But are we looking at our needs? Are we, if you think about stories and the hero's journey framework, you've got Harry Potter is the star of the story, but Dumbledore advises and supports and provides a lot of the tools that Harry needs to go on the journey. And maybe when we're showing someone around, we're being the star of the show, and we're making the school the star of the show, and we're showing everything that's marvelous about this, instead of thinking, actually, the star of the show is this client and their journey. And I'm there to show them what that experience would be like if they came here and to help them through that journey. So my role is to be Dumbledore or Yoda or the advisor, the guide, and to really make it clear this is their journey. And actually, all of these amazing features that I'm making the star of the show are just the tools and just the devices that are going to help them achieve their goals. So do I know what this client's goals are? Do I know what their children's goals are? And am I selling this education as the way that they can achieve their life goals, and have a great time and great experience on the journey?
I agree. I think, I mean, shout out to Kamal
Mm.
there. I'll tag him in. But his line was futures, not features, wasn't it? I think
Yeah,
it was in the thing.
absolutely.
So how do we show them what their future here will look like, rather than showing them the features? Because actually, the features are all on the website. I'm a big believer that tours are to really get a feel for a place, and it's all about the feeling. So if you're just talking about features, you're not tapping into that. Um, I love that. Thank you very much. That was super useful. So, in terms of follow up, then, so I'm a big advocate of following up that tour. You've given yourself and become vulnerable almost in yourself doing the tour or having the consultation, and you've been curious about them. You've invested quite a lot of your own self
Mm.
into that person. So, if they then say no or ghost you or reject you in some way, how do you stop taking that personally?
Um, I mean, it never is personal. I'm just going to relate it back to
Okay.
my coaching role. We mind read, we think, oh, it's because of me, but actually, so many things in life, people are on their own journeys, and I think what you've just said, that if you were the star of the show and then it went wrong for you, that feels awful, doesn't it? But if you're helping somebody else, if they make a wrong decision for them, that's not down to you. If they make a right decision for them, that's also not down for you.
Mm.
So I think owning either, if you find notice your thoughts, if you find yourself going, yeah, I got that one, that's just as dangerous, actually, because all you're doing is helping somebody make the decision that is or isn't down to them. As a coach, I my job is to create a safe space in which people can explore their thought processes and decide on actions that are right for them. If in the end they decide not to do it, that's not my failure. That's down to their decision. And actually, sometimes a coaching journey can be about taking somebody through all the processes and them deciding not to do something, and that can be just as useful. And I would say that if that's your job that you're doing, maybe you've taken them through the journey and the process, and this school isn't the right decision for them,
Mm.
and you've still been really helpful to them in letting them come to that conclusion at the right time, and you've got a decision for them that's really clear. So okay, this is not going to go any further. I'm not going to spend more time and energy on this one. I think that that role and the narrative about that role is super, super important. Are you putting the whole of your identity in the outcome, or are you thinking, where do I belong in this process? And being really sure on yourself. I've done this process really well. I've taken this person through the journey. The outcome's neither here nor there.
Mm. I think the SLT might think the outcome is here or there when they're pushing and pushing for results. But I think I like that, but it still sounds quite passive to me as a hardened sales professional, that I've done my best, now it's up to them. I would
Yeah,
still think, so for me, I think, oh, now you're leaving it in their court, which of course it is ultimately, but it does give you then an excuse to say, well, I'm leaving it up to them, it's their journey, it's their decision, and then not follow up Or am I wrong? Am I understanding it wrong?
Yeah, but that's where you come in with your decision process, because my understanding, and certainly this is something that has worked for me in my conversations with you, is I would give up on that process too early the first time, rather than following through. How many, I mean, you know better than me, how many touch points?
Yeah, there's a lot of touch points.
Yeah. And most people give up after two, maybe
Yeah,
three. Yeah.
yeah.
And that journey is still going on. I mean, you know, the journey is over when that young person is enrolled at another school. You don't continue following up the touch points after that. But well,
Well, you do actually.
okay.
I know what you mean. You wouldn't for that year necessarily or for that time, but for example, again, this agent I was talking to who I've trained, so someone says no, they go to another school, that's fine.
Yeah.
But then later, you can contact them very gently and say, how are you getting on? What's going on? And sometimes they want to move
Yeah.
or they're not happy, in which case you open the conversation again. And one of the language schools I've been working with, we've gone through all of their kind of cold leads, as it were, from last year. And they've had bookings from that because they're kind of resuscitating those leads. So a no isn't necessarily a no forever. And
Okay.
sorry, that's disagreeing.
No, no, I think that's, you know, you're the sales professional. I think I'm looking from a psychological perspective.
Yeah,
If you look at Stephen Covey, you focus
yeah,
on the things that you can control.
yeah.
We spend so much of our time worrying about things that we've got no control over. What you have got control over is your behavior. What you have got control over is your thought processes. You know, when you start thinking, oh, I have to do that, I must do that, this feels uncomfortable, this is giving you information about your value system. And your, you know, so if you, again, is it about the client? And what you've just told me in that example of following up is you've still got the client's best interests at heart. You know, you're checking in. Are you okay? Has that worked out well for you? And they say yes, and that's fine.
Yeah.
You know, you're not then going to go, well, actually, I think you. But that checking in is not. You know, it shows a respect for the human, and I think that's the difference between this idea of pushy, kind of, I'm going to get the sale, whatever you think, is not a great attitude. And I also get what you're saying about SLT, and also as a human, if we get results, we feel great. I'm not negating that at all. But I think if you're asking yourself, how am I best serving in this role? How am I showing up as my best self? So if my values are kindness or honesty, I don't want to be manipulative. I don't want to be hard on this person. But you know, there's different kinds of kindness. I do a lot of work with strengths and values. Kindness and honesty are two that people in life. I have a question that I ask my students. So, you know, if somebody's just bought a new outfit, and you think it looks horrendous, but they got it in the sale and they spent a lot of money on it and they're not going to be able to take it back. And they go, what do you think? What do you do? And then, you know, the kindness people go, you know, I just say, oh, you look lovely. And the honesty people go, no, I'm just going to say, sorry, don't go out wearing that. And then you ask the question, okay, so if it's not an outfit, if it's a marriage, you know, this person that you love dearly has just got engaged to somebody you really don't like for good reasons. You know, you see that they have a problem with cruelty, bad temper, an addiction, something that you think is going to really harm your loved one down the line. Do you say that to them, or do you go, oh, it's their decision? And quite a lot of the kindness people at that point go, no, I would tell them that. And that's why I'm using this example, which might seem completely irrelevant. Sorry, I'm going off sideways. But actually, if you're talking about someone's long-term future happiness, honesty is kindness. It is kindness, as opposed to, something that they wear for an evening once or twice, and that's their decision and it's a subjective taste. Anyway, so I would say the example you gave of following up down the line is kindness. You're still got that person's best interest at heart. If you're doing it for you and for your numbers, but that's fine if that aligns with your own values and your way of looking at the world. But some people feel really uncomfortable with that. So asking that decision, being clear, that is kindness.
I like that. And actually, you could do both. So
Yeah,
you may need to hit your numbers and still think it's a kindness to check in with some
yeah.
people that you've spent time with. Okay, great. Thank you. Oh, that marriage one was hard. I'm still asking myself. I would probably have to say I'm quite blunt, obviously, so I would have to say. But it makes me feel better that it's a kindness, not just me being honest.
Right.
So I appreciate that. So we've got some kind of faster questions for you now. You don't have to be fast, but they're what I think of quick fire questions. But if you want to go off and talk about one, then let's do. But I would love to know, what is something about you that people would not expect?
Um, do you know it's funny, I've been asked this kind of question before, and I'm always like, oh, I wonder if they'd expect that. One of my friends recently did a trip canoeing the Zambezi, whitewater rafting. And I did that when I was 18. And she did not expect that. She was just like, oh, I wouldn't have thought that you were that kind of person. But actually, the people who know me well might expect that I can juggle, or that I whitewater rafted on the Zambezi when I was young. I wouldn't do it now, I don't think. And she's, yeah, my age, so or thereabouts. So I think she's super brave. But I think the thing that I don't expect about myself, I have a qualification in transport, a certificate in professional competence, which means that actually I could operate legally a fleet of transport vehicles. And that is not something that
No.
I kind of recognize in one of my past selves. So something
I
you didn't know about me.
I didn't know that, and I wouldn't have expected it, and I just can't see it, but I love it at the same time, which is brilliant. And was that your ambition, or what did you want to be before you entered either the world of education or of coaching? Was there something that you wanted to be when you grew up?
Yeah, do you know, I think I'd spent my whole life looking for that thing. I went into education as a teacher, and I spent the first year teaching. I taught in Zambia. Um, and I spent the first year going, well, I'm not really a teacher. I absolutely didn't own that identity, and then I ended up as director of marketing and admissions, and I didn't say, well, I'm not really, but I certainly felt that. I always felt I stepped into jobs and then learned to do them, and hopefully to be good at them. When I stepped into the role of course director at the Cambridge University Coaching Certificate Program, and I was kind of going, oh my goodness, this is an incredible responsibility. But I think when I studied, I went back as a mature student and did a master's in applied positive psychology and coaching psychology. And the topic on meaning really impacted me, because it talked about meaning. People look for meaning in their lives and they look for the thing. But meaning is really found in doing what you find meaningful.
Mm.
And what I've always found meaningful is connecting with people and supporting them and helping them. And you can do that. I do it as a coach a lot of the time. I do it as a lecturer. But I also did it in my sales role. When I showed people around the school, I was genuinely passionate about the school. I was genuinely passionate about the students. And knowing how that school transformed lives and the opportunity that this person I was showing around would have to change not just their child's life, but their whole family's life by being part of that community. That was what gave me meaning in that role. And so I would say, you know, what did I want to be before that? I think before I might have said I was looking for the job that suited me, but actually I think what I was looking for was the opportunity to connect, to be of service, to help people with their thought processes. And that's what I'm doing now in a number of different ways.
Fabulous. And in terms of, I'm going to say a sales habit, what sales habit have you had to learn, and what sales habit have you had to unlearn in your career?
Okay. I think when I started, what I was saying about all the facts, you know, I wanted to know that the year the school was founded, I wanted to know all the features, I wanted to know all the stuff. And I think, and actually it's not just in sales, Nicola. I'm a kind of information and model addict. I've probably thrown about 3 out just during this conversation, which is not about those things. Over explaining to prove my value. Information dumping because I'm interested in the information, I'm interested in the things. And when I say I've had to unlearn it, I think I'm still working on unlearning that habit because I'm so fascinated by, you know, that how all models, George Box famously said, all models are wrong, but some of them are useful. And the psychological models that I've learned have been so useful to me. You know, I think I was overly emotionally invested in my job. Everything mattered to me. And I went to a coach at that time, the first time I ever came across coaching. And he said to me, he said, I work with people on the front lines in wars. I work with paramedics. And your attachment to your job and the importance of your job is on a more intense level than theirs.
Wow.
And that kind of ability to step back and detach your whole identity from your job, that I did learn, you know, that whole thing of work-life balance and really understanding what is your concern and what is your under your control. That was incredibly helpful to me. And that's one of the things that I work on in helping with other people. And guess what? I've over-explained again. So
I love it. I mean, I really struggle with separating my identity between work and out of
yeah.
work. Really struggle with that, so totally get it. So tell me, in terms of what drains your energy fastest in a work setting, I know what this is and I had it the other day. So in terms of you're in a work setting, you're coaching or you're supervising, what drains your energy the fastest?
Um, I mean, conversations where people are not saying what they actually think. I think that's quite draining. But I think for me personally, it's disconnection and lack of curiosity. So, you know, when people are going through the motions, when they're not really interested, when they're not connecting at a human level, I think sometimes I do well-being training in organizations, and most of the time that's a superbly energizing
Yeah.
experience. And you go into some organizations where they're just genuinely box ticking, or people are so stressed and they've been told you have to be here in this room, but there is an actual penalty for them in the time that they're giving up to be there, and they're kind of willing but anxious, but they've got so much else going on that they can't be present doing the thing that we're doing. You know, we're living in our heads. We're playing a movie either of what happened earlier or what's going to happen, and not being present with the person that you're with in the space. Yeah, I find that draining.
Yeah, I'm with you actually. There was a lady in one of my recent sessions that acted a bit like a toddler, like didn't take her coat off, had her keys in her hand for an entire day. swung her legs under the table. It was really didn't want to be there and was kind of made to be there. It made it very, very difficult to work and hard on her colleagues as well. But without pulling her out in front of the whole team, or maybe you've got some advice there. I know the scarf model would have worked brilliantly if I'd had one-on-one time with her. But what would I? So this isn't just me. This will be whole teams where there's someone that's always negative or a bit toxic. How do we deal with that? How do we deal with that one person if we can't take them aside?
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of different ways and strategies. I mean, one of the things, if I'm doing a presentation, I'll quite often say at the beginning, you know, this is the time that we're going to have the break. And all of you, you know, first of all, thank you for being here. You know, all of you have got many other things that you could be doing. But as we are here together, could you just write down anything that's on your mind that is bothering you, that you can't deal with now? And then know that you're not going to deal with that again until the break. Because for the next hour and a half, let's be present together in this moment. So that's what I might do with a one-off situation. In a longer term work environment, particularly if you've got that person who drains, the best thing to do is to have a team agreement. There's something called a design team alliance, where you before you start on the work that you're doing together, you say, how do we want to work together? And what are our values here? What are the things that we'd like, you know, honesty, kindness, whatever those values. And then what does that look like in terms of behavior? So, you know, people will then come up with their pet peeves, not scrolling on my phone, maybe not kicking our legs against the table, you know, whatever it is. And then the one that I think is most important is, how do we want to be together if things go wrong? That's a great question to ask before you start working as a team, because, you know, and then people go, well, what do you mean? Well, what are the kind of things that go wrong in any team environment? Somebody doesn't do what they say they want to do. You know, somebody is being passive aggressive. So obviously, if you do this before the team starts working together, none of those things have happened. So you go, okay, well, if nobody here is likely to do that, but if they did, how do we as a team want to deal with that? Do we want to call it out? Do we want, you know, and then you make the agreement on what would you do if that happened before any of it's happened. And then actually you've got a contract and it can be revisited. It's not set in stone. But let's have a look at our team alliance and let's think about, is there anything that needs adjusting here? And let's think about our own contribution. Now, obviously that involves everybody in the room having some level of self-awareness and at least the willingness to talk. But usually at the start of a group working together, people come into it with goodwill, and even if they don't, if you're talking about how we are together, at least they have to consider their own behavior and other people's. So yeah, that's something that I use if I'm working with a group over time.
Good advice. I will use that. And what's the one piece of advice you would give your younger self to help you today?
Sorry, to help me
to help you in your life or business today. What's the one piece of advice you would give your younger self?
I think that the story we tell ourselves about the thing helps us deal with the thing, whatever it is. So that idea of metacognition, which is paying attention not only to what's going on, but to what our thought process is about the thing that's going on. And instead of judging, you know, is this good? Is this bad? Ask yourself the question, what's most helpful? Is this thing helpful or not helpful to our goal as an organization? And is my behavior, you know, if I'm thinking, oh, this is making me feel really uncomfortable, instead of going, oh, I'm uncomfortable, I don't like this is awful, think, what is that level of being uncomfortable telling me about my values? And then how can I use my values towards my goal? in this situation instead of going into threat mode and shutting down.
Okay, good stuff. Okay, lots to chew over there and lots of really practical tips as well. I thank you very much for that. Where can people find you if they want to get hold of you and chat to you?
LinkedIn is where I hang out mostly. Ruth Hughes MSc. There are quite a lot of Ruth Hugheses. So if you're looking for me, look for Ruth Hughes MSc, and then that will be the right one. My company is Curious Human Limited. And yeah, really happy to have a chat. And there's, I think on my LinkedIn, there's also a Calendly link if anybody wants to book in for a chat with me.
Lovely. I would highly recommend it. I recommend Ruth all the time. So backed by no fluff. Thank you so much for sharing and oversharing with us today. I appreciate it. I could listen to it for hours, but I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much, Ruth.
You're really welcome, Nicola. Always a pleasure to spend time with you.